Good morning, Minister of Home Affairs and Information, Honorable Wilfred Abrams, Director Acting of the Barbados Met Services, Brian Murray, Director of the Child Care Board, Mrs. Roseanne Richards, Permanent Secretary Acting in the Ministry of Home Affairs and Information, Ms. Wendy Odell, Deputy Director, Department of Emergency Management, Captain Robert Haywood, staff, ladies and gentlemen, members of the media. As customary at this time of the year, I join with my colleagues in welcoming you to this press conference as we usher in the official start of the 2023 Atlantic hurricane season. And as you have seen today while traversing here, the rains have started. It only takes one system to make landfall to disrupt life, society, and business as usual. DM continues to work in tandem with other agencies of government, private sector, community entities, regional and international stakeholders to ensure that we are in a state of readiness. Our focus primarily here at the Department of Emergency Management has been in terms of facilities readiness and readying our various first responders in terms of focusing in on our various plans and procedures. As all Barbadians would know by now, this space at the National Emergency Operations Center is really the crisis coordination center in any event. And all agencies, all stakeholders will converge here if and when there is an impact to ensure that we rally you through the storm. Today is one of the many events that we ask you to tune into as we ensure that you get the necessary information that you would need throughout the season. It is so very important that you get relevant and timely information so that you can act when the time comes. We ensure that we do our planning, and we implore you to ensure that you as individuals, as families, as communities also do your preparedness planning. For 6 months of the year, we are under the threat of the hurricane hazard, and it is really important for us to ensure that we have all our bases covered and make sure that we prepare. The Department of Emergency Management will, along with our partners, will disseminate a lot of information as we continue to ensure that you get the information that you require, and we'll ensure that it is in a palatable format. I ask you to review our social media platforms to ensure that you are tuned in to all the government's platforms and the various media, so that you get the information that is readily required. This month, next month really, starting tomorrow, we will have a number of activities within the community space, as well as streaming on social media. And I really implore you to take the opportunity to engage with us and engage as a community, as a family, to ensure that you get the much needed information, and feel free to engage with us and ask us any questions that you need to ask us, just to ensure that you have all your bases covered throughout the season. So without further ado, I again thank you for tuning in this morning to our annual press conference. And I will give way to the slew of speakers that we have this morning this is a collaborative effort, and it is really to ensure that the public, the Barbadian public, is well informed and ready for the Atlantic hurricane season and whatever that may come our way. Thank you.
I want to wish a pleasant good morning to the Honorable Wilfred Abrams, Minister of Home Affairs and Information, Ms. Kerry Hines, the Director of the Department of Emergency Management, Ms. Roseanne Richards, the Director of the Child Care Board, Ms. Wendy Odell, the Acting Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Home Affairs, online viewers, and social and media houses, welcome to the 2023 press conference. And I'm going to talk about the Atlantic hurricane season and what we could expect. And I want to say that every hurricane season is not the same. It varies from year to year. So what I'm going to do first is that we are going to talk about what happened last year. So we had 14 named storms. Of those 14 named storms, 8 become hurricanes. Of those 8 hurricanes, 2 become major hurricanes with category 3 or higher. And one of those hurricanes was Hurricane Ian, and we know what it did to Florida last year. Now, keep in mind that the long-term average at this time is 14 named storms, of which 7 hurricanes were formed, and then we have 3 major hurricanes. And lucky for us, we did not have to deal with any major tropical depressions, storms, or hurricanes. However, we had a few systems that give us a little brush of what we could expect. We had potential tropical cyclone on the 28th of June. We had a tropical wave on July 31st, and that particular tropical wave did some damage further south in Grenada. We had another tropical wave on September 21st, and from time to time we had the localized flooding across some sections of the island. And as I mentioned, we had the shear lines activity associated with the intertropical convergence zone and some troughs. And luckily, we had no freak storms as what will happen in the year 2021, and we are very grateful for that. And this was what actually happened last year. We had 14 named storms, 8 became hurricanes, and of those 8 hurricanes, 2 were major. And you can see it was almost close to the climatological average, and this is the map from last year. And what is particular about this map from last year is that there were hardly any storms or hurricanes that formed consistently out in the Atlantic Ocean. They mostly formed more in the northern Atlantic and the western Caribbean. Only 2 systems actually passed through the eastern Caribbean and the Antilles, and those were pretty weak, and we are very grateful for that. Now, the question that you have to ask now is, what do we expect this year? So based on the projections from different entities like the Colorado State University, the Tropical Storm Risk, the University of Arizona, and the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, CSU indicated 13 named storms, of which 6 will become hurricanes, of 2 will become major. TSR indicated 12, of which 6 will become hurricanes, and 2 will become major hurricanes. The University of Arizona probably was a little more excited, so they had 19 named storms, of which 9 will become hurricanes and 5 will become major. And from NOAA, which was the most recent update, they predicted 12 to 17 named storms, of which 5 to 9 will become hurricanes, and of that amount, from 1 to 4 will become major hurricanes. So in a nutshell, it's going to be probably a near normal season, just like last year, as you can see on the slide. And these are the names for this year's hurricane season. And luckily, no system has formed as yet. But as I said, yes, sometimes when you have a system forming outside the hurricane season, but one did form outside the hurricane season, but it has not been named because that was all up in January this year. And the other factor that it could have this year in terms of the hurricane formation is the El Nino. We have a developing El Nino in the Pacific. And according to the Climate Prediction Center, El Nino is going to be present throughout the whole of the summer, as from June onwards, all up to December. Now, as I go on, I will explain what the El Nino is all about, because we have these events from, on more than one occasion. This is from our climate newsletter, which is produced by the Barbados Meteorological Services. We are now into an El Nino watch. And the other factors that we also have to take in consideration is the positioning and the strength of the Atlantic high pressure systems during the summer months. You also got to consider the dust that comes from Sahara, because those tend to have a negative effect on tropical cyclone formation. And also the strength of the pre-existing disturbances in the central and east Atlantic Ocean. For example, the tropical waves, disturbances, and lows. And what I hear is that usually around this time of the year, the tropical waves are usually low latitude, which means that they are all down below 12 degrees north. I know some of us tend to get excited, oh, there's a tropical wave coming. Well, we have to hold on a little bit until early June, because according to the climatology, the waves tend to move up a little higher and higher, as the season goes on. So I'm going to explain what El Nino is. It is basically a climate pattern that describes the unusual warming of the surface waters in the eastern tropical Pacific Ocean. So we are now going into the warm phase. And the thing about it is that we go in phases. Some years we have an El Nino, and some years we have a La Nina. We came from a persistent La Nina, which lasted almost 2 to 3 years, and we are now going to El Nino. And according to reports, it could be the strongest one ever for the time being. But there's a catch. The thing about El Nino is that when we have this phenomenon, we tend to get less rainfall across the island and fewer hurricanes. So this is the latest sea surface temperatures anomaly map. And you may probably see that that black circle is showing where most of the action may take place in terms of the heavy thunderstorms and all of that. But you will notice too is that the Atlantic Ocean is also warm. So it's going to be a toss-up between El Nino in the Pacific and the warm Atlantic Ocean waters, because in order for tropical cyclones to form, you need sea surface temperatures in the Atlantic over 27 degrees Celsius. But the El Nino, on the other hand, because of the activity of the thunderstorms in the Pacific, you may get a shift in the wind patterns and very strong winds at the upper levels over the Caribbean, including us. And those very strong winds could weaken the thunderstorms and the cyclones that pass our way. And here in this slide, as I mentioned before, we have lower rainfall across the island, and we have fewer tropical cyclones. But it does not mean that we will not be affected by a tropical storm or a hurricane. And a case in point was with Tropical Storm Lily, which took place on the 23rd of September in 2002. Not 2022, 2002. And we know what Tropical Storm Lily did. So, I'm now going on to impact-based forecasting. What is it? It is basically the timely dissemination of accurate and easily understandable forecast information. So the BMS has gone from doing a forecast for what the weather will be to what the weather will do. It was introduced in June 1st, 2020. And we are still doing improvements as we speak. So I want to give an example of the IBF in action. So we had split the weather into 5 elements, which is excess rainfall, severe thunderstorm, high wind, marine conditions, and here's, now this is a screenshot from the previous that was before we went from 5 icons to 6 icons. And this was what occurred on June 17th, 2021, where we had a freak storm. So this is what it looks like in full flight when we have all these elements going on at the same time. We had a flash flood warning, we had a severe thunderstorm warning, we had a high wind warning, and at the same time we had some swells. We had yellow for the marine, and there was also haze knocking about. So, if you want to get the Barbados Insight app, it is available on the Google Play Store and can download on your phone. And the good thing about it too is that whenever a significant event is being alerted, it also gives out an audio tone also. In the next slide here, what you can see is that those are the tools that we use in our impact-based forecasting. We have the weather radar located in St. Joseph. We also have a network of map weather stations, which give us, also up-to-date rainfall accumulations in some areas. And these have been very helpful in our impact-based forecasting for the past 2 or 3 years. We also have our satellite dish network. We can download the images. It's on our website. And we also have the modeling, so we can tell you, well, how much rain to expect, how much wind to expect, and what accumulations are going to be. I'm going to go into a few reminders as far as this harvesting season is concerned. Firstly, I want to show a table of earliest systems that affected Barbados from 1955 to present. Because normally in June, it tends to be a little quiet, but there are some years you will probably get 1, 2 tropical cyclones popping up and probably give us a little brush with some rain and a little wind. You can see here you had Tropical Storm Chantal in 2013 and we had Elsa in 2021. And you should know that not every season is the same. Every month of that. So regardless whether it is an El Nino or a La Nina or is neutral, it is all of us, every individual, business, family. They should make sure that they do the necessary preparations in advance. So in other words, you don't have to buy everything one time. You can plan and buy a few things throughout the year so that when the season actually comes, you are well prepared and will be able to withstand any shock. As you can see, you must also know your shelters. If you are in doubt that your home is not safe, you go to the designated shelters. They have both Cat 1 and Cat 2 shelters. And make sure that you have adequate supplies of water, enough non-perishables, and please resist from having to buy up too many perishable fuels, especially around this time of year, because you could get a severe thunderstorm rolling through and it could knock out power for days. And that is the end of my presentation. I want you all to be safe this hurricane season.
Honorable Wilfred Abrams, Minister of Home Affairs and Information, Ms. Carrie Hines, Director of the Department of Emergency Management, Mr. Brian Murray, the Acting Director of the Met Services, Ms. Wendy Odell, Acting Permanent Secretary, staff, media, and those viewing, good morning. The Child Care Board is pleased to be a part of this press conference this morning because in preparation for the hurricane season, oftentimes we look at putting together packages of foodstuff, making sure that medications and everything are put in place, but children also need to be protected. In the event children have to go into shelters, or in the event that there's any displacement or dislocation, when we are planning, we have to plan and prepare for the children. And child protection and emergency services refers to all efforts to prevent and respond to abuse, neglect, exploitation, and violence against children in the aftermath of a disaster. But as I said, before the disaster, in the planning and the preparation, we must prepare for our children. It includes guaranteeing that children receive all necessary assistance that is required for their safety and well-being during this time, protecting children from maltreatment and ensure their survival and well-being during and after the disaster. Children are a vulnerable group and they are very dependent on adults, and they need to care for them even more at this time. In an emergency, several factors increases the child's vulnerability: displacement and relocation, separation from family and community, loss of a loved one or even a pet, losing home and possessions, lack of safety, and reliance on humanitarian assistance may expose them to violence, exploitation, and abuse. Assisting children in this context of an emergency has to be done through careful intervention, addressing their immediate needs and protecting them from harm. Parents are vital and critical. They need to talk to their children about the disaster before and about the disaster after. I would suggest that they need to listen to all the information that is put up by the Department of Emergency Management, because lots of PSAs are put out there where parents can get information, and they need to follow that. They need to look at the things they need to do before, putting plans in place. As I said before, planning must ensure that children are also planned for their safety. If you're going to pack an emergency package or an emergency bag, ensure that that child or those children, their plans are also prepared for. Some children are diabetics, some children are asthmatics, so therefore you need to make sure that you have their medication in place as well. If you have to move from home, you also need to prepare for that. And if you have to go into an emergency shelter, you need to help your child or your children, once you move from home to go to that emergency shelter, to acclimatize to that shelter. They're not in the comforts of their home anymore. You have to show them where the washrooms, the bathrooms, etc. are. You need to keep your eyes on them. You need to be vigilant, because a lot of things could happen in an emergency shelter. Children are not in the confines of their home where there is their own bedroom to go to. There's an open space, there's a communal setting, and we have to help them prepare them for managing this new situation. So apart from helping them to acclimatize in the new space, you as parents, or we as parents, we have to be vigilant. We have to show them the facilities around. We have to observe them while they're engaged in activities. We must always be vigilant of what is happening around them. At the hearing of thunder, at the sight of lightning, children could become very fearful, and children of different ages respond to disasters differently. Some might be afraid of darkness. They might be crying all through the night. Parents have to be there to soothe them and support them. Some of them might, having moved from the confines or the comforts of their home to come into the new space, they have to adjust, and they might not adjust that easily, and that is a challenge. I'm very pleased that the Child Care Board is here to be part of this morning's launch, because oftentimes, as I said, we don't put much in place for children in the event of a disaster. We have not had many, but coming out of the situation from St. Vincent, where children had to go into schools and be exposed, they were not adequately prepared, even in the situation in Dominica after the hurricanes. So I think while we have been blessed and have been favored, we need to take care of our children and prepare them that in the event that they have to be displaced or dislocated, that we are prepared to look after them during this time. Thank you.
Good morning. We're here again. So good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is a pleasure to address you at this press conference, which marks the official start of the 2023 Atlantic hurricane season. I acknowledge the presence of various stakeholders who are here today and who continue to actively contribute to our national readiness efforts. Each year, we have to ensure that we're in a position to mount a formidable national preparedness, coordination, and response effort. A myriad of national agencies, private sector, non-governmental organizations, community-based groups, and volunteers participate in this process of ensuring that we are ready as a nation to weather any impact. Over the past few months, we've been engaging in coordination and preparedness meetings to ensure that the national response mechanism is ready to respond in the event that it is activated. We continue to refine and synchronize our plans and procedures at the national level to upgrade our critical infrastructure, to make it more resilient to hazards, to train and sensitize our emergency response teams, conduct preparedness actions such as cleaning waterways and drains, trimming foliage, undertaking flood mitigation works, readying our shelters, amongst other things. As well, we interface with the regional and international stakeholders such as SEDIMA, the RSS, and the UN system to ensure that they're available to support any national level response as required. As Minister responsible for disaster management information, it is essential that relevant and timely disaster information is communicated to the public. It is necessary that you, the public, is kept abreast of important warning information, as well as tips on what you need to do as a citizen, pre, during, and post an impact. Hence, we've mounted a pervasive public awareness campaign, which started on May 15, 2023, and will continue to the end of the season. And this campaign focuses on this hurricane season. Many of you would realize that from early May, you started to get all the messages about hurricane preparedness, tips on what to do, information about shelters, all that sort of thing. Because although the hurricane season traditionally and officially starts on the 1st of June, we've been seeing systems developing earlier, and we've been noting climatic events earlier into May. So rather than wait to the 1st of June, when it's possible now to get a system in May, we targeted May the 1st as our get-ready date internally, while we accept that the official start of the hurricane season is June the 1st. So this put us a bit ahead of the ball this year. As you may be aware, recovery efforts are still ongoing from Hurricane Elsa, and we have made considerable strides in repairing homes impacted by Elsa. Reconstruction agencies are working assiduously to complete the remainder of home repairs for those who sought public assistance in the aftermath of Hurricane Elsa. It is our intention to assist as many persons as possible to return to improved housing solutions. So where we have built or repaired, we have tried to repair better and build back better. We also need to impress upon you that COVID-19 is still impacting our population, albeit on a reduced scale. So the public is asked to be mindful of this and build in the necessary precautions as you carry out your preparedness efforts for the 2023 hurricane season. So please just bear in mind as you plan your business that COVID is still with us. The district emergency organizations and other community response organizations also assist in readying themselves and the communities in which they operate for the season. This continues to be an ongoing area in which we welcome your support and we encourage your support. There are 30 DEOs across the island. We ask civic-minded persons to join the DEO in your area and to volunteer your services. This will go a long way in supporting the community's response to any event which impacts us this season. In addition, as an added benefit, there are training and skills development opportunities available once you join the DEO. You can get training in radio use, you can get training in chainsaw use, you can get training in a lot of areas, and add that to your skill set. So there's some spin-off benefits for joining and supporting the DEOs. We ask that stakeholders at all levels play their part in national preparedness and the readiness effort. We call on you, the citizens of Barbados, to carry your individual, household, and community planning and readiness actions in an attempt to reduce the impact that any hazard may have on your community. This will include ensuring that your houses and your homes are in a position to withstand an event. We implore you retrofit your homes as required. Clean up around your homes. Check the status of your insurance policies, and I repeat, check the status of your insurance policies. If the insurance is not valid at the time of the event, you cannot claim after. Ensure that all your family members and persons in your care know what to do if we are impacted. The time of the event is not the time to figure out what to do. We need to know beforehand and ensure that all of those for whom we have responsibility as well know what to do if we're impacted. Have that emergency plan in place. Know where the shelters closest to you are in case you need to access them. And the emergency shelter listing for 2023 is also now available to the public. Let us not forget that hazards affect communities, and mounting a coherent, cohesive, and collective community response will go a long way in assisting the community and by extension the country when recovering quickly from any event. It is hoped that Barbados is not subject to any devastating or debilitating impacts this season. But in the instance that we are ready to respond and recover as quickly as possible. As the acting director of Met, I advise you, every hurricane season is not the same. And the prevailing conditions suggest a not exceptional hurricane season. And this may give people some level of comfort. I tell you, you take that comfort at your own peril. Because it only takes one event. We could have the lowest, slowest hurricane season in the history of hurricane seasons. But if one hurricane forms and it impacts us, that is one too many. Prepare yourself in the same way that we are preparing ourselves. We are doing our part, Barbados. But you also must do your part to protect yourself, your family, and your community. Thank you. The floor is open to questions.
Mr. Minister, have you learned anything out of ELSA that would sharpen us and make us prepared for the events that come our way?
I'm glad you asked that question. And yes, we learned a lot from ELSA. When Dorian traversed the region, Dorian approached Barbados as a significant storm. You could see a clearly defined eye. Dorian passed right over Barbados. If you looked at the satellite photos, Barbados was right there in the middle. But Met would tell you there was a prevalence of Sahara dust and other factors that were not conducive to precipitation. Those are big words. It meant that lucky for us, everything else conspired for the rain to not fall. When Dorian passed us, we had a couple down trees. That was probably the extent of it. Dorian moved on from Barbados, encountered some more favorable conditions, and decimated Bahamas. It parked over Bahamas for 2 days. 2 days. We got the talk that we hear Bajans say every hurricane season that God is a Bajan. And nothing ain't gonna hit us. That was Dorian, which I think became a Category 5 hurricane. Elsa hit us. Elsa barely made Category 1. Elsa was past Barbados in about 2 hours. It barely made Category 1. And we know the damage that Elsa caused in Barbados. Our housing stock is vulnerable. That is the reality. Our housing stock is vulnerable. So what did Elsa teach us? Elsa taught us that storms can hit Barbados. Elsa taught us that our housing stock is more vulnerable than we thought. Elsa taught us that it actually does not take much. We don't need to be looking out for the Category 3s and the Category 4s and the Category 5s. We need to be preparing ourselves for the tropical storms and the Category 1s and the Category 2s as well. We learned a lot over the last couple of hurricane seasons. I'll tell you one other thing as well. I want Barbadians to be honest with themselves. Because as we do prior to the storm, the DEOs will visit some people you will call the vulnerable people that you're aware of. I mean, it happens in constituencies. The constituency organizations will call around people who are vulnerable and encourage them to go in shelters. I know of 2 people that I went with my assistant Nadia to see those people before Elsa, and I said to them, your house cannot withstand this storm. Please go in a shelter. The shelters were open well in advance. We published all the shelter information. We encouraged people to go in the shelters. Those people did not go in the shelter. When we went, as the all clear was given, and we went specifically to check on those two. Those houses have folded like a pack of cards. It is God. It is God that stopped anybody from dying in there. We could not believe that anybody survived in those houses after that storm. I know Bajans are attached to their house. I can't get sorry to call out my own parents. I cannot get them to leave and go anywhere, right? Anywhere in a hurricane, because Bajans have an attachment to their house. You have an attachment to your possessions. Every possession you have can be replaced. Pack your passport, your medication, whatnot into some Ziploc bags. You could get them at the supermarket. You could get them at Price Smart, Costco. That's all of them have the double zip freezer bags. Pack the critical stuff in those. If you know your house is vulnerable, when you are advised that the storm is going to hit us, pick up the things you've pre-packed and make your way to the nearest shelter. You can go back and check your house afterwards. So yes, it taught us a lot, and it taught us that we need to take each hurricane season seriously, because it only takes one. Don't just aim for the preparation for the beginning of this hurricane season. Because while we did our hurricane preparedness assessment for the 1st of June, we're not stopping. This has to be done on a 2-week basis in the hurricane season. Every 2 weeks. If you're not prepared, we have to get ourselves prepared. If you're prepared, we have to ensure that we are still prepared. A lot of the tips don't change. You know what was one of the biggest issues following Elsa? When electricity went down? Meat spoiling in people's freezers. Half the lines you saw in people going to the supermarket and going to the Price Smarts and Costco Less prior to Hurricane Elsa was not to buy batteries. It was not to buy torchlights. It was not to buy sardines. Bajans went out in the numbers and bought meat. I'm dead serious. We know it. We got the feedback from the distributors. Bajans went out in their numbers and stocked up on meat. The head thing that we tell people not to do. So please, the rules don't change, and we're going to keep reinforcing them. If you need us to explain to you why rules exist, why certain things are prescribed or articulated, then we will do that. We will give you all of the information that you need to prepare yourself for the hurricanes. If you're in any doubt or you need additional information, we're going to give you the contact information at the end of this press conference, and it's going to be circulated over and over and over. And I want to thank our partners in the media, because the media has actually worked with us significantly in this and in assisting us in getting the message out. So I thank them, but we're going to do our own bit to ensure that Barbadians are well informed and have all of the information necessary to prepare themselves for this hurricane season. Next question.
There was a system last year, I don't recall the name, but based on climate change, things have gone a little different from how they used to were when we used to say God is a Bajan. That may probably cause most of us to think differently. But because of climate change, is there any difference in what you've perceived at what the Hurricane Center and the Arizona and those folk have said that could indicate where we could find systems developing this season?
You're looking at the right person. Come, Matt.
Yeah, that's what I gave it to him.
The microphone over here, though.
Yes, good morning again. Okay, now, what I could say is that, the guys that do the forecast, they'll tell you how much hurricanes they're going to form. What they will not tell you is where and exactly where they're going to form, because there's so many factors that will determine where a tropical cyclone is going to form. And as far as climate change is concerned, the only concern that we should have now is the fact that if the waters are very warm, that's more fuel for the hurricanes. So you probably get more stronger and severe hurricanes. There may be a few from time to time, but the thing about it is that they are going to be stronger. In other words, you probably get a few more Cat 3 to Cat 5 hurricanes as time goes on.
Any shifting in where they would usually begin based on the parameters that you would be dealing with?
The shifting will depend on the conditions at the time, and you must understand that the weather is very dynamic. It is not static for a long time. You have to deal with, and so you have to deal with all of the other oscillations that are not mentioned at this time, but understand is that the weather is constantly shifting, so you may have a Cat 5 hurricane forming down south one year, and then it will shift another year. So every year is not the same. I hope that answers your question.
A bit, but I guess we have to wait for the system to develop.
And I must also add to it is that not every system that comes off the African coast will form over there. And that's something that we have to keep in mind, because there's this conception that the system, you have a tropical wave that comes off the coast. As soon as it leaves Dakar, Senegal, it forms into a tropical storm. They're not going to do that, not all the time. And as you realize, over the past few years, some form right on our doorstep, some form as they pass, and some form in Western Caribbean. Each cyclone and system is different.
Question, Minister. Only last week we got a flash. Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Minister. Only last week we had a flash flood situation in the north, and some members of the public, we noticed a level of trepidation with regard to mitigation work not being done in their area, and there was a level of concern that certain structures were not in place. And this was just before June. We are now one day before June. Can you speak of any collaboration or partnership that is in place with regard to having certain things in place to make those members of the public feel better? They complain that no mitigation work has been done for a long, long time as it relates to dealing with water runoff, as it relates to deal with flooding, especially in the north of the country. And now we are in the hurricane season. How do you allay the fears of these people who still believe when the water comes down from Diamond Corner and from wherever it comes through the north of the country, that they could be significantly affected during a climate event?
Barry, as I indicated, it's not just for us aiming for June the 1st and we stop there, right? It is about being ready and continuing to keep ready. We're aware of the flood-prone or flooding-prone areas, and the Ministry of Public Works, we had the discussion yesterday at Cabinet as well about prioritizing the flood-prone areas. So while we have to make sure all the waterways are kept clear, some areas or waterways leading to some areas are going to have to be done a lot more than others. So that is definitely on our radar, and the aim is to minimize the impact on areas such as that. Having said that, allow me to say this. Sometimes a flash flood is exactly that. So I'm not excusing what happened the other day, and I'm not saying that better cannot be done or better should not be done or we don't need to do more maintenance, right? Putting that aside for a second, if a significant amount of rain falls in a very short space of time, all of the infrastructure in the world is not helping you. Right? And sometimes we get significant flooding in areas over a 2-hour period. When that happens, it will flood. No matter what we do, it will flood. The ground cannot absorb the rain as fast as possible, as fast as it needs to prevent flooding. Sabu did a demonstration to me once that just, because my question as well, like Bajans, is, but rain fell yesterday and we had flooding. Sabu took a plant pot and poured water in gently into the plant pot. And the water seeped down into the soil. Then Sabu took another jug, dumped it all into the plant pot at one time. And the water rose to the brim. right? We might not be able to control flooding in terms when there's very significant rainfall, but we can do the things that we need to do to ensure that our flooding dissipates as quickly as possible. And that is the responsibility of government. So we hear you loud and clear, and we have noted the areas that are persistent with the flooding, and I'm assured by the Minister responsible for Public Works that the Ministry, the Drainage Department, is out in full force to address those concerns.
Thank you. I have a question for the Director. Director, good morning. Director, I took note of the Minister saying that the hurricane shelter list is now available to the public. Could you speak to the public about how we inspect our shelters, how often we inspect them, what kind of inspection needs to be done for them to be considered ready, and what is the state of readiness for these shelters that are now listed? I wouldn't expect the DEM to have a shelter on a list that isn't ready, but I would like you to speak generally to the readiness of our shelters, and just give us an approximation of how much are ready right now, because we can't go to the list right now.
Okay. Thanks for the question. In terms of the shelter readiness, at this point in time, our list will reflect that there are 30 Category 1 emergency shelters and 59 Category 2 emergency shelters. What the categories mean: Category 1, you can go in before the system approaches. Category 2, we will inspect those shelters. If there's an impact, we will inspect, and then we will give you the green light if you can go in or not. Now, on a yearly basis, the shelter audits are spearheaded by the Ministry of Education. There is a multi-stakeholder team, which includes the Department of Emergency Management. We have engineers, and we have health officials and the district emergency organizations, to name a few. We will go around along with the head teachers or the persons responsible for the particular shelters, and we will inspect the facilities. If for whatever reason there is a deficiency that can't be fixed, we will endeavor to do so prior to the season or whenever. Nothing goes on that list. No shelter goes on that list unless the entire team gives it the green light. It is very important for the public to understand, and we always say this: use the shelters as a last resort. It is a public good for the government to ensure that there are shelters available for those who need them. But your house should be your home should be your shelter. And Minister would have indicated before, as well as a number of other persons, it's important that you retrofit your homes. It's important that you see your home not only as an investment, but as your shelter. The director of the Child Care Board, she indicated, when you go into those communal spaces, they're just that. You are there with strangers. We will always endeavor to ensure that those shelters are ready, that the public shelters are ready, and ready to receive persons if needs be. But also, it is important that persons seek to ensure that their homes are also ready. So the listing is out. We have as I said, 89 shelters across the island, and it is important that persons know where their nearest shelter, because the nearest shelter may not be in your neighborhood. You may have to traverse over some space and time to get there, but it is very important that you know where your nearest shelter is.
On a yearly basis, do you guys remove or add shelters?
Yes, we can, as I said, based on the audit and assessment. It is an extensive audit and assessment form. And we can take shelters off, or we can remove the shelters from the list, or we can add. What we have asked persons and our more so our community volunteers to do when they're traversing the various communities, they can identify potential buildings that we can use as shelters. And what we will do, we'll pull the team together and we will go and inspect and say, you know, at the end of the day, if we can really utilize the facility as a shelter. And what that does as well is if there are certain aspects of the building or that needs to be retrofitted, we let the persons know. So in the event that they may want it to be on the shelter listing, probably another year after, in future years, then they would know what they need to do.
Last question. 89 shelters sounds like a lot. Can you speak to the level of volunteerism that would be needed to man 89 shelters if we were to have an event?
It calls on a lot of stakeholders to come together. We have the persons at the Ministry of Education, we have the various head teachers, we have Red Cross, we have the district emergency organization. And in the message that you heard from Minister, we implore persons to come and volunteer your services. Because remember, the shelters are in your neighborhood, they're in your community. And it is important that you help your brothers and sisters in the eventuality that we are impacted. Please come before. We also engage and deliver shelter management training for the shelter managers, so we don't throw you in at the deep end. We go through an extensive training course for persons who volunteer their services to be shelter managers. But it is a multi-stakeholder arrangement where we have a number of persons there to assist in terms of managing the shelter, communications within the shelter, and ensuring that you are all safe. And shelter managers from time to time will also call on persons within the shelter to assist in that endeavor.
Before you go, Madam, I just want to be clear for myself. 89 shelters, are they 100% ready for tomorrow's action?
They have been cleared by the team. We don't know what will happen, but based on the expert judgment of the persons who would have gone around and done the shelter audits, these are the shelters that we have made available to the public.
And Mr. Minister, before we go, with technology the way it is, and we all internet ready and internet based, are we ready that we wouldn't be, that if there's a heavy impact, that we wouldn't lose contact for Barbadians as well as or being cut off from the rest of the world, because it can happen with the technology and the finickiness sometimes of it. There's a talk between stakeholders asking government to have the important services, the government, police, the QEH, on their separate platform that would make them not probably impregnable, but put them in a position where if others are cut off, those important services will still be. How close are we to that?
That's something that we actually do standard, right? There's a priority list for reconnections. So, for example, if we are impacted by something significant, there's a priority list that includes the QEH, the command center, police stations, whatnot. The priority is to reconnect them to electricity, to utilities, to whatever, so that they can function properly. We also have some redundancy in terms of our communication network. But look, I can't sit here and guarantee you anything. If a Category 5 storm hit and flattened Barbados, you know what happens. It happens in the States that people are cut off. With the best will in the world, nature is more powerful than anything we can conceive. All we can do is do our best with what we have and building redundancies to give ourselves the best chance in an event. And that is what we have done, that is what we continue to do, and that's what we will keep doing for the rest of this hurricane season. I just want to leave you with one other thing. just contextually, and it follows on from the question you raised, Barry. When we say we need to do our part, we don't just have to do our part in relation to around our own house and fixing up our own house, but we also need to be aware of the things that we do. Half the time when flooding occurs somewhere is because the drains are blocked. And quite often, somebody who knows the place well will say, give me a stick, and they go by a grate. You can't see it, and they fish and pull off the piece of plastic, and the water starts to move. If you go by the pump house in Bridgetown and look down in there, you will see the amount of plastic that is there, bottles, caps, garbage bags. In all of our drains, when we do the proper cleaning of our drains, tons and tons of plastic bottles come out, cups, garbage bags. If you don't secure your garbage, then your one garbage bag that you left out might go and cause a whole area to flood. So we also need to be responsible. At this particular point in time, we need to secure our garbage and be mindful. When a warning is given, when we say clean up around your place, don't just look for the branches. When we ask you to take your garbage inside, it's not that we want to inconvenience you with garbage, because even coming to an event, the sanitation does a round. And in the 24 hours prior to an event, the sanitation is supposed to pick up all of the garbage in Barbados. So we're not asking you to, if you have garbage outside, take it in or hold your garbage until after the event. We are saying, do what you need to do to protect yourself and protect your neighbors, because your bike may clog a drain, and the house that may be lost as a result of it might be yours. We are all in this. This affects us all. We all have our roles to play, and I'm asking everyone, please play your role. So thank you. I'll just close off the meeting. So I want to thank all who came out. I want to thank all who have joined in online. And as I said, we're all in this together. We undertake to keep you informed. We undertake to keep you very well informed, working with our partners in the press to advise you of all the avenues that are available to get information and where to get your proper information from. At this point in time, at this season in particular, it is critical that you get your information from reliable sources. Don't just go for the sensational people. We know who the reliable sources are. We all know who the news partners, the recognized and accredited news partners who work with the government are. We're not keeping you in the dark. From the time we know something, we will tell you, because our aim is to warn you as early as possible. So please, please monitor the accredited news agencies and our news partners, and we will also give you all the information that you require to make this the safest possible hurricane season in 2023. Thank you very much.